Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's edition of Trump News from Trump Revolution, featuring Ivo Fisic, your friendly underground reporter. Today's date is January 27th, 2017, day 8 of the Trump Revolution. On this episode, illegals voted, but only nearly 1 million. German editor calls for Trump to be murdered. ABC News gets a Trump Smackdown, and the Women's March celebrates kidnapping, raping, and murdering. Of course they do. After the report, we will be joined by our founder and director, William R. Collier Jr., who will share news about the Trump Revolution. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our top story. Illegals voted, but only nearly 1 million. Study finds nearly 1 million votes cast illegally for Hillary. A study conducted by political scientist Richman of Old Dominion University has found that upwards of 800,000 votes cast for Hillary Clinton on November 8th were cast illegally. This study only looks at one aspect of voter fraud: non-citizen voting. This isn't to say that there weren't more non-citizens voting, only that this study found that there were at least 800,000 non-citizen votes cast for Hillary Clinton. What's interesting is that the political scientist posted this study as a rebuttal to President Trump's claims that up to 5 million non-citizens voted. So, what you're saying is, we cheated, but not by as much as you say we cheated, right? Because that's how I read this. The study was based on a number of national polls conducted by a coalition of universities. The poll found that 6.4% of non-citizens voted, which works out to more than 834,381 votes, of which Hillary Clinton, it is estimated, would have garnered 81% of the vote. And folks, I'm betting much higher even than that. And this is how he came up with the figure of 800,000. Now remember, the purpose of his study is to prove that progressives cheated less than Trump said they did. And the proof that they cheated less than Trump said they did? Polls. That's right. Pollsters would have asked non-citizens if they voted. 6.4% of those asked said, yep, we voted. Now, I ask you this simple question. If 6.4% actually admitted to voting illegally, how many more do you think actually voted illegally? What this poll shows is that America has an epic problem with voter fraud, that citizens of this nation cannot rely on a voting process that allows a significant number of non-citizens to affect the critical changes in policy that profoundly affect the citizens' lives. That's kind of like letting the Dallas Cowboys fans vote on who the Eagles should have on their roster. Richman said of his study, is it plausible that non-citizen votes added to Clinton's margin? Yes. Is it plausible that non-citizen votes account for the entire nationwide popular vote margin held by Clinton? Not at all. So, again, if you're actually ready to believe a study that bases its finding on asking people whether they did something illegal or not, what he's saying is, well, we cheated, but not by that much. I think it's time to go over this sacred cow the progressives have had for too long. The dead vote, the non-citizen vote, the multiple vote. And I should add this. One of the reasons why these national elections are so critical is this. The federal government has far too much power over our daily lives. I'd wager that if so much could not be gained or lost from holding power, that the political divisions, the depths to which political factions would sink, would not be nearly as extreme as they are today. German newspaper publisher calls on Trump to be murdered. A German newspaper editor is calling for the assassination of our American president, Donald J. Trump. The editor-publisher in question is Joffe, who heads the German weekly news publication Die Zeit. He was making an appearance on a German news panel show, Ard-Pressclub. The panel was answering calls from viewers. One viewer called in and asked if President Trump could be impeached to, quote, end the catastrophe. A female panelist answered, well, there has to be a qualified two-thirds majority of the Senate in order for a removal of office to take place. These are politically and legally pretty high hurdles. A lot would have to happen for it. We're far away from that. Now, that response, folks, is actually cogent to the caller's question and addresses the caller's actual question in a lucid, factual manner. But then, in comes Joffe, who simply answered, murder in the White House, for example. That's right. Joffe is suggesting that the best way to end the catastrophe is to murder our president. Now, we know that Angela Merkel has all kinds of hate laws and laws against inciting people to violence. Somehow I'm betting those laws won't be enforced because the target isn't an Islamist that might be raping German girls, but rather it's an American president who doesn't appear to want to play Merkel's and, I am assuming, Joffe's reindeer games anymore. Now, this is the same guy who wrote this brilliant hit piece in The Guardian on Donald Trump entitled, Trump has bared his fangs to Merkel. He will do untold damage to Europe. Here is an excerpt from that demonstration of progressive party press hate, read in the Weasley voice that it deserves. But then Trump bared his fangs. Her open-door policy on Syrian refugees was a catastrophic mistake. A term he repeated thrice. How could she give up control of her country's borders, taking in all those illegals? Nor were the Germans amused by Trump's next broadside that targeted Germany as master of Europe. Look at, well, this is Trump. Look at the European Union, and it's Germany. Basically, a vehicle for Germany. Of course, Berlin is number one by dint of economic clout and strategic position. But we don't utter such inconvenient truths in polite Western society. Sticking to protocol, Merkel's spokesman did not fire back. He's the better man. He just noted that his boss had read the interview with great interest. Make that. You are out of bounds, Mr. Trump. That's right. So as you can see, the real problem here is our president recognizes the full-on progressive hate empire Merkel and her cohorts of self-hating Germans wants to build, and Joffe got his feels hurt. Trump's out of bounds for challenging that progressive hate machine hegemony in Europe. But you're not out of bounds for calling on our president to be murdered? Hypocrisy. Thy name is progressive. Trump calls out ABC News on ignoring March for Life while covering March for Death. The Women's March, the March for Death, gets more coverage from the Progressive Party press than the March for Life. Color me surprised. President Donald Trump's ABC interview Wednesday night, January 25th, contained this little gem in the form of a back and forth between President Trump and ABC News' David Muir. In that exchange, Muir wanted to talk about the anti-Trump, anti-American, anti-life, pro-murder, so-called Women's March, sponsored by George Soros and other big money bagmen of the progressive hate machine. Well, President Trump, as he so often does, would have none of it. Rather than let this progressive party press hack define the terms of the battle, President Trump set the terms. Muir said, "Let me just ask you while we're standing outside, could you hear the voices from the Women's March here in Washington?" Trump responded, "No, I couldn't hear them. The crowds were large, but you will have large crowds on Friday too, which is mostly pro-life people." He continued, "You're going to have a lot of people coming on Friday, and I will say this, and I didn't realize this, but I was told you will have a very large crowd of people. I don't know as large or larger. Some people said it will be larger. Pro-life people, and they say the press doesn't cover them. At this point, Muir suddenly realized what he should have known by now. President Trump doesn't color within the lines you Progressive Party press hacks like to set down. All Muir could offer was, I don't want to compare crowd sizes again. Muir was trying to evade the facts that the Progressive Party press will cover their progressive hate machine marches that are anti-life, anti-American, anti-Trump, and not cover a march that stands for the life and the rights of the unborn. Trump didn't let him off, however. He continued, No, you shouldn't. But let me just tell you, what you do say is that the press doesn't cover them. Lastly, in asking Muir's question of whether he heard that progressive hate march or not, Trump finally added, I do, but I have to also say, we just had an election a few weeks ago, and they voted in many cases, and in some cases they didn't vote, I imagine, and we did have an election. With that being said, absolutely I have the responsibility to everybody, including people that didn't vote for Donald Trump. Totally. The Media Research Center added to Trump's claim of media bias against the March for Life that in November 2016, CBS and NBC dedicated 3 times more coverage of one neo-Nazi rally in 2016 than they did the last 4 years of the March for Life. So far for this year's march, the networks have spent 120 more times talking about the Women's March, as was discovered by the MRC's Katie Yoder. Folks, calling out the progressive hate machine's Progressive Party press on their hypocrisy and obvious bias is just one of the joys of having Donald Trump and not Hillary. I have a private server and I'm not afraid to erase it, Clinton. Women's March featured convicted accomplice to murder as speaker. Convicted felon and kidnapper Donna Hylton spoke at Women's March. A woman who was convicted of kidnapping, torturing, raping, and then murdering a man landed a cherry job in the Women's March. She was listed as a featured speaker of the event. The name of this woman? Donna Hylton. The one refreshing thing about Hylton is she openly did what many in this March for Hate secretly want to do. Kidnap, rape, and murder men. Bring the patriarchy down. In the mid-'80s, Hylton, along with 6 other people, 3 men and 3 women, kidnapped Thomas Vigliarolo, a 62-year-old real estate broker. They sodomized him with a 3-foot pole, they said, because he was a homo anyway. Their words, not mine. Yeah, she's also a bigot. But it's okay, she's black and progressive, so we'll give her a pass on murdering people she thinks might be gay. In a Psychology Today article about the crime, New York City detective William Sperling stated, I couldn't believe this girl, who was so intelligent and nice-looking, could be so unemotional about what she was telling me she and her friends had done. They'd squeezed the victim's testicles with a pair of pliers, beat him, burned him. The article in Psychology Today also reveals that Hylton had delivered a ransom note to one of the victim's friends that requested $435,000. The victim was already dead at this point. Hylton was convicted of kidnapping and other charges. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now, since her release, she's been a social justice activist seeking prison and sentencing reforms and a veritable darling of the progressive hate machine. Do you remember what happened to the founder of Mozilla because he gave money to a group resisting legalizing gay marriage? That man was tossed out of his own company by a bunch of virtue-signaling, bigoted members of the progressive hate machine. Do you remember what the progressive hate machine did to Paula Deen for once possibly using the N-word in a private conversation? Well, they almost destroyed her career and reputation. But murder a man while being a black woman who supports your pro-death pro-murder, anti-life cause? Gets celebrated by that same group of virtue-signaling, bigoted members of the progressive hate machine. The virtue signaling of the progressive hate machine is not so much about virtue as using social shame as a means of silencing your political opposition. But thanks in large part to the successful campaign of President Donald Trump, the power of that social shaming is diminishing daily. Stories like this just help hasten the demise of that one trick progressives had to get their way when pesky facts once again interfere with their agenda. Thank you for joining us on this Trump News Report featuring Ivo Fisic, your underground reporter. Join us on Monday for another edition of the Trump News Report from the Trump Revolution. Find out more about the Trump Revolution at TrumpRevolutionUSA.com. That's TrumpRevolutionUSA.com.